Hello, Swirlheads. This is Greg Allison coming to you, a special guest tonight. We have the guest, David Pyne. He's the Deputy Director for National Operations, the EMP Task Force on National and Homeland Security, the organization formed by the late, great Dr. Peter Vincent Pyne. As some of you know, I am the Alabama State Director of the same operation, same organization. And we're going to be talking about the threat that is facing America and the world today, given everything going on in the Mideast and elsewhere, as we can do this. So, David, what is your assessment of the threat to Israel at the moment? Let's just kind of narrow it in for starters.
Well, I mean, this is an unprecedented attack by Hamas terrorists. Really, so many war crimes and atrocities. It's difficult to discuss all the horrible things that we know that Hamas has done to Israeli civilians, women and children, babies. So it's a complete travesty, and I join with all Americans that support Israel and their just war against these evil terrorists. In terms of the threat to Israel, I mean, currently they're fighting a limited war. Granted, it was 5,000 rockets that were fired against Israelis, at least 1,000 killed so far, maybe closer to 1,200 at this point, with thousands, maybe a few thousand Israeli wounded, and then of course 22 dead Americans, 17 American hostages. Um, at this point, they've mobilized their military, 300,000 Army reservists to prepare to invade the Gaza Strip, which is it's a very small piece of land. It's going to be real easy to overrun, less easy to try to go house to house to eradicate the Hamas terrorists. This is going to be a multi-month operation. The last Gaza war of 2014 lasted, I think, 18 days. This one's probably going to be 3 to 4 times longer, maybe even 5 or 6. Um, the Israeli leadership, they just established a unity government with the opposition, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is really focused on permanently eradicating the Hamas threat, not simply just degrading it as they did last time around 9 years ago. But the problem is, once they go into Gaza, Hezbollah has essentially pledged that they will go to war against Israel as well. And as General Keane pointed out in a Fox News interview, I think it was yesterday or the day before, actually a couple days ago, they have 130,000 rockets, mostly more advanced Iranian-supplied rockets and missiles than Hamas has, and they're going to rain down tens of thousands of those on Israel's northern territory and cities and towns once Israel invades. And General King was saying, he doesn't think it's likely, but it's possible that Israel might request U.S. military intervention. And in my opinion, I think the most likely mode of military intervention would be special forces, of course, to help in hostage rescue, but mainly from the Israeli perspective, trying to lend some missile defense capabilities, which would be pretty expensive. We only have a limited number of um, standard 3 missiles that are on our Aegis cruisers and destroyers. I think there's only, there's 3, 1 cruiser and 4 destroyers that are part of the forward carrier battle group that is being deployed from Athens, Greece to the far east Mediterranean, in position to intervene, or at least not really to intervene, but just to provide support if necessary. I'm hoping the U.S. doesn't get involved at all in this war. There is a possibility of potential escalation of regional conflict. There's been some Israeli government voices that have said some really disturbing things. One Israeli lawmaker, a member of the Knesset, said that it was time to nuke Gaza. Gaza is about 3 miles wide, and it's located all along Israel's borders. So, needless to say, a few nukes along Gaza would not be without massive radioactive contamination to Israel itself. So, another one, reportedly Iran is behind this attack. They've masterminded over a period of a few months, despite Biden intel agency denials. claiming that their intel shows that Iran was caught flat-footed and was surprised by the Hamas attacks, when the Wall Street Journal reported that in fact that Iran had been planning it for months, and that it was the Iranian leadership themselves that greenlighted it. But some Israeli officials, high-placed Israeli officials, said that they might decide to target senior Iranian officials for assassination. And of course, if they were to take out the Ayatollah, for example, this could potentially result in a nuclear escalation between Iran and Israel.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential for escalation in terms of a regional war. There's been a lot of discussion, like from Lindsey Graham, suggesting that the United States should attack Iranian oil refineries. In the United States has already been in some tension with Iran through our placement of forces there in the Persian Gulf area to protect cargo ships that are carrying oil, tanker ships. We've had a lot of tension there ourselves with them already. So, and there's just been a call that went out yesterday by leader of Hamas asking for a Jihad in Alaska, after the mosque of the Dome of the Rock, flood event special event for Friday, targeting mostly Israeli, but he mentioned Americans too. So there's a lot of potential for escalation here. And I want to make one thing clear. I try not to pick sides between Palestinians and Israelis here on my channel, or anybody. I try to stay out of picking sides. I try to stay outside of that realm. However, any attack on children, families is heinous. Whichever side does it. I understand also that Hamas has a tendency to like to put a lot of their launchers on housetops. So it's like the whole situation is baited. But given all this potential, and given that there apparently are American hostages, and I have seen discussion of sending special forces in already to take to rescue those hostages, but given that we have hostages there, that we've lost Americans in this already, what do you see as the potential that America might get involved in this conflict?
I think the potential is low. Israel, of course, is a nuclear power. According to my estimates, they have about 300 nuclear weapons. They really, if Israel can't defend itself with 300 nuclear weapons, what more can the U.S. offer? Honestly, I don't see the U.S. providing value added outside of perhaps, missile defense systems, and that's really what Israel wants. I don't think they're asking for U.S. military intervention. They've never asked for U.S. military intervention, not even when they're at risk of being overrun in the 1948 War for Independence. What they're asking for is more missile defense reloads, more ABMs, Iron Dome, Arrow. I worked on the Arrow system back in 2003 to 2005 when I was in the Missile Defense Agency. Israel doesn't share any of their my experience at the Missile Defense Agency is Israel did not share any of the technology that they developed with us, that we provided the technology, and kind of, they added on to it with our assistance. They don't provide any of the finished products back to us. So I'm not sure to what extent we can help them for the Iron Dome and whatnot that they have not provided back to us. But those are areas that, we could potentially assist them. Also, I think we discussed prior to the interview that there was a stockpile, a U.S. stockpile in Israel, mainly of artillery munitions, but also missiles and rockets that were intended for exactly this contingency, in which Israel needed to be quickly resupplied with, for their U.S. arms and howitzers. And the Biden administration made the decision to transfer 80% of that to Ukraine earlier this year, back in January. So there were 375,000 artillery rounds, heavy artillery rounds, and other munitions that we had stockpiled. Now that's down from 375,000 to 75,000. So Israel used 34,000 artillery rounds, 155 millimeter artillery rounds during its 18-day Gaza war of 2014. At that rate, they would be out within probably 5 to 6 weeks, assuming the same rate of usage. So this may be a more intense conflict. So they might run out much sooner than that, and it's unclear to me, what stocks that they have, separate from what we've stockpiled in Israel.
So you've mentioned this ammunition depletion. We've also depleted our own ammo. If Hezbollah gets involved and starts launching all these rockets and the conflict broadens, there's also talk of other people from other countries, such as the Taliban, wants to come in and get involved to support the Palestinians. So if all this takes place, then Israel might be a lot more strained to resupply themselves. What are they at risk then? What happens as this conflict broadens? You've mentioned the potential for it to become a regional war. How do you see this playing out?
Well, I mean, the good news is the U.S. and Israel control the Mediterranean Sea. There's really, I mean, we could interdict, Iranian supplies, trying to resupply Hamas in Gaza. And Gaza is going to be overrun. So, in terms of the real threat would be kind of a Vietnam situation where Lebanon it kind of acts as North Vietnam, and it's kind of, we can bomb it or Israel can bomb it, but they can't invade it type of situation. Israel, of course, did invade Lebanon, southern Lebanon, during the mid 80s. That was widely viewed as kind of a fiasco. I don't think they want to repeat that. Hezbollah does have brigades in southern Lebanon along the Israeli border, which they could use to invade Israel. But that seems unlikely. I think they're more likely to conduct smaller unit border raids, similar to what we saw Hamas did, but on a larger scale in southern Israel. Um, so, and there was an Israeli leader that said that they recommended that Israel bomb Damascus, which really be a foolish move. These types of wars need to be contained as much as possible. Right now, this is not an interstate war. This is an Israeli war on terror, which the U.S. Ought to support, not with troops or with direct U.S. military intervention, but with military, support in terms of direct military assistance, weapons and ammo, and intelligence sharing and logistics. And that's what Israel needs to win. Syria hasn't really. I mean, they're not involved. Hezbollah is it's primarily Iranian backed. So they're really, kind of playing the part of the U.S. in this proxy war in terms of, fueling the war, fueling the conflict with the terrorist attacks against Israel.
Well, what concerns me in these kind of conflicts is that, when saner heads prevail, you use logic like you were talking about. But when heinous acts are committed and the population gets stirred up, sometimes sanity goes out the window. People react with emotion. And when they react with emotion, bad things happen. And that's where I worry about escalation falling outside the realm of logical type movements like you were discussing here. So I think that's where you got potential for escalation, such as the members of the Knesset, I guess it was, that were calling for the attacks on Damascus to take out al-Assad. So that would definitely be over the top, and that would definitely broaden the conflict and get other people coming in, and particularly possibly even Russia, since Russia is such an ally to Syria. So that's, I see a lot of problems in that. Also, when it comes to the Gaza Strip, sure, Israel with their weapons or aircraft and everything, so they could level the buildings, but there is about 500 miles of tunnels there. I could see that war turning into something more akin to the battle over Bakhmut. Unfortunately, with a lot more civilians involved, half the people in Palestine are under 18. So it'd be, I think, a tragic and very difficult battle if they engage in that. What do you think about all this?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, there is a massive tunnel network in the Gaza Strip that's used for hostages. It's for Hamas militants as well as munitions and rockets. So if Israel is really planning to eradicate Hamas, they're going to have to go through clear those tunnels, and the losses are going to be heavy. I think I mean, Israeli casualties in the last Hamas war were, I think, around 2,000. This could be easily 10 times that. Israel, of course, they are a major military power. They're a great power, a nuclear power. They're the smallest of the great powers, with a population of less than 10 million and territory the size a little less than Belize or El Salvador. So this is a tiny country in terms of territory, but they have a very powerful military, one of the best trained in the world, consisting of both men and women. They draft women. The first countries in the world to really have a full scale mandatory military draft for women. And I visited Israel myself as a member of a Department of Defense delegation 3 months to the day before the September 11th attacks in the Twin Towers and the Pentagon, which was 2 miles from where I worked at the time. So, I have lots of experiences to share on that. But Israel, it's a fairly militarized society by necessity. They're like Germany and both world wars. They're pretty much surrounded, but they do have great power allies. The U.S. is a very strong ally, and they're very strong themselves. They're stronger militarily than their neighbors, and so I am quite hopeful and optimistic that I believe that Israel is going to win this war. I believe it's likely to be contained to again to southern Lebanon and the Gaza Strip. I don't think Iran and Syria are likely to intervene militarily, let alone the U.S., unless, of course, Israel makes good on these threats, to assassinate top Iranian leaders or to bomb Damascus, both of which I think would be catastrophic mistakes.
Yeah, I agree. Those would be catastrophic mistakes, but I could also see, like I said, sometimes sanity goes out the window when emotion comes into play. And there's a lot of emotion going on over there right now due to and maybe that's why the acts that occurred were so heinous. They were intended maybe to incite emotion and retribution, to fan the flames for the population. So I think all these things are possible in that regard. Logically, it shouldn't happen. I agree with you, but I really question how well logic's going to be followed in these cases, especially if the population really is demanding bigger action. The politicians, respond to that, and the military often responds responds to the politicians. So, excuse me. My big question, if one, Biden has appeared to very heavily favor Iran up to this point. Now suddenly he is talking very tough pro-Israel all at once. So that's a big switch for him. So you got to wonder where he stands on all it. But moreover, the thing that catches my attention is, why did we need to send an aircraft carrier strike group right there to the proximity of Israel in this conflict? Why do you need that to support them with armaments? And as if that weren't enough, we're talking about sending the Dwight Eisenhower carrier strike force group in there to back that up. 2 carrier strike force carrier groups, when one seems to be overkill to me, given the kind of participation you're anticipating. So that really makes me scratch my head. What do you think about it all?
Well, I think it's a combination of strategic signaling. Biden, of course, wants to look tough. He wants to look pro-Israel, even though he's not. And of course, he wants to put U.S. military forces in the region because there may be a need for hostage rescue with these 17 Americans. I mean, that's not a large number of Americans. We probably have a lot more than that, that are currently hostages or in prison, wrongfully, we believe, across the world in other countries. But given the fact that Israel is about to invade Gaza, wouldn't be as much of a high risk operation for the U.S. to insert, a limited number of special forces to help locate and extricate those 17 hostages. The problem is hostage rescue is going to be the chances of our American hostages and most of the Israeli hostages being rescued without being shot or killed are pretty limited. So Biden, you mentioned that Biden has done an about face on Israel, and you're exactly right. Biden has been very anti-Israel during his presidency, particularly since Netanyahu has come to power. He's denounced Netanyahu as very extremist, hardline nationalist. He's used all kinds of terms to attack Netanyahu and the current Israeli government. And as you mentioned, he's been pursuing a very pro-Iranian policy since dating from the Biden administration with uh, the Joint Plan of Action, the JPOA, in which Biden and Obama gave $152 billion worth of of money and funding
Now, say
to.
again, how much money did we send over on pallets and aircraft?
It was $2 billion.
That was $2 billion. But
$2 billion in cash.
You just cited 152 billion. Really? We sent that much money over there?
Yeah, it was 150 billion that we had frozen from back from the time that the revolutionaries took over Iran in 1979, and then 2 billion in taxpayer cash that we sent them in the middle of the night on an aircraft unannounced, kind of bribe money essentially, just to sweeten the deal. They demanded an extra 2 billion in cash, and Obama caved and appeased them. And of course, they use this money to finish, developing their nuclear missiles and, arm those and test super EMP weapons, which they plan to use against the U.S. in the event of a direct war with Iran. So, Iran is a deadly threat. They could destroy the U.S., just like North Korea, China, and Russia. And we're not prepared against the EMP threat or nuclear missiles. Very few ABMs and really no hardened systems against super EMP, perhaps even at the military level. We hardened our systems against Cold War, what I call conventional nuclear weapons, that have that are protected against 50,000 volts versus 100,000, 200,000 volts that we'd have with super EMP. So, yeah, it is a situation that we need to manage. Ideally, there'd be some kind of negotiated solution. I've never supported a two-state solution for Palestine, but I'm willing to support that. I'm willing to go there if we could get the Fatah ruling party's cooperation in banning Hamas and extraditing all Hamas militants to Israel, and ensuring that they never come to power ever again. They're never allowed to, run for office. I think that's the solution. It has to be a two-pronged solution. Every war needs to have an end game. It needs to have an achievable, strategy, both militarily and politically. We don't see that in Ukraine. There's, you and I have discussed Ukraine in the past. Biden administration has no end game for Ukraine. Our end game is essentially to sacrifice hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians, brave Ukrainian fighters and civilians in a meat grinder counteroffensive against prepared Russian positions in fortifications where they've lost up to 40,000 men killed in action in just the last 4 months of fighting to liberate 0.23% of Russian annexed territory for Ukraine. So that's another no-win war that we're fighting in Ukraine.
I've said that we were willing, and by we I'm talking about the United States administration, willing to fight Russia to the last Ukrainian, and that's what it looks like. It's a very bad situation there too. So yeah, this thing with the Mid East and Israel could flare up in the same kind of thing. But here we are today, looking at threats still in Europe with the Ukrainian war and Russia. We're looking at threats now in the Mid East. We're looking at threats dealing with China with respect to the South China Sea and the Philippines, and with respect to Taiwan. And then on top of that, we're dealing with North Korea. We've got our hands full. We had scaled our military down from being able to handle a 2-theater war to 1-theater war. Then we sent a big bulk of our ammunition to Ukraine. At the same time, China's been they're building ships faster than we could possibly build. Where are we at today in the global security of the United States?
The U.S. has never been weaker militarily comparative to our enemies, perhaps since the days of the War of 1812. I mean, it's the disparity is growing by the day. Russia and China together, their economy is much larger than the U.S. on its own. China has, they have twice the manufacturing industrial capability that we have. And in the area that you mentioned, naval warship construction, they have the ability to construct warships 227 times faster, according to a recent report. So, essentially, if you think about World War II and how the U.S. was able to crush Imperial Japan by our industrial might and our ability to produce 100, carriers, full attack carriers, light carriers, and escort carriers, just within a 3 to 4 year period, it would be exactly in reverse. We would be Imperial Japan with a smaller industrial capability, and China would overwhelm us in a purely conventional war with warship construction, theater nuclear superiority, supremacy, EMP supremacy, larger army, larger Navy, Coast Guard, right down the road, the largest amphibious force in the world when you include the roll-on, roll-off ships that they have, 360 dual-use military ferries, and they've mobilized their entire economy for war. We haven't seen that happen since the Soviet days, when immediately preceding World War II, when I believe Stalin was preparing to, fully mobilize his military to invade Nazi Germany, but Hitler beat him to the punch. So that's what we're facing. There's a lot of comparisons between that, World War II, and what China is doing right now, and they're all negative for the U.S. In terms of historical comparisons.
How do we wake people up in this country? How do we wake our establishment? How do we get back into production? What do we need to do here in the United States to avert war? We've talked in the past about this in terms of spheres of influence and recognizing this and that. We've not done that either, and there doesn't seem to be any political incentive or interest in doing that. So we're not in a good position. We're poking the bear and the dragon, and we're like the mouse doing the poking right now, all things considered. So yeah, sure, we've got some teeth. We still have some nukes, but as you and I and Dr. Peter Vincent Pry used to tell us, that if the adversaries employ EMP super weapons in advance and knock out our abilities to communicate with our nuclear forces afield, they're sending out their EAMs, which we require to launch our systems. And also they could, if they perform a first strike on us, they could take out so much stuff. We'd be prostrate, and they know that, and that may tempt them to do things they would not otherwise do. We've lost this advantage we've had for decades of being the strongest kid on the block. But we still think we're the strongest kid on the block. We still act like it, but we're no longer there. So where do we go from here, David?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, so in the book Catastrophe Now, which I co-authored along with Cindy Ayers and the late Dr. Peter Pry, our beloved, courageous visionary leader who sadly passed from cancer late last summer, that DC would be the first target of any nuclear attack scenario. And according to my estimation, there's a very high likelihood that Russia could use hypersonic missile submarines firing a Zircon hypersonic nuclear missile to take out DC in 5 minutes from a range of 200 miles, likely before Biden was able to issue a nuclear retaliatory launch order. Not to mention the fact that our current policy, PDD 60, prescribes that it's the official U.S. policy that we won't launch until there's a nuclear impact on U.S. soil. Well, I can guarantee you that if there is a nuclear war, the first nuclear impact will be Washington, D.C. So the Nuclear Command Authority, if the attack was staged at the right time, with the president, the vice president, all three nuclear footballs in D.C., they could potentially take out our ability to retaliate at all. And as you mentioned, as we discussed, I think before, it would only take, as Peter Pry mentioned, it would only take 5 warheads to take out 100% of our nuclear bombers, including our B-2s, as well as our 2 nuclear missile submarine bases, where 10 of our nuclear missile submarines out of 14 are located at any given time. So that would take out 52% of our strategic nuclear deterrent. Another 4 warheads would take out 100% of our reserve warheads. We do have 2,000 partially dismantled nuclear warheads that are strategic, and another 50 that are tactical, in what's kind of a hedge um, against exactly this type of Sino-Russian nuclear breakout contingency that we're facing today. And yet there's there's only a few calls from Republicans in Congress to start reassembling those and uploading them onto our Trident nuclear submarines, our nuclear missiles, as well as our Minutemen III nuclear missiles on land. And that's something that would take 2 to 4 years, according to the nuclear experts that I've talked to. So that's one of the key ways we get around that. But at this point, the hour is so late in terms of the fact that it would take 2 to 5 years to harden the grid. It would take about that amount of time to deploy a national missile defense system, or increase the size of our nuclear deterrent by 2.5 times. So at this point, we need to pursue diplomacy. Diplomacy is the key weapon we have right now in our arsenal. If we were to end the war in Ukraine, for example, sign a mutual security treaty with Russia, and kind of really neutralize the Sino-Russian alliance, military alliance, we wouldn't have to worry about them going to war against us in a Taiwan scenario. And if we did that at the same time that we either mediated some kind of confederation agreement between Russia or between China and Taiwan, or simply stated that provided strategic clarity that we would not defend Taiwan militarily, that could help ensure that we don't get into World War III in the near future with either Russia or China. And we could do that while establishing a nuclear red line around our treaty allies in the Pacific. So while the loss of Taiwan to the Western Alliance would be great, the cost of losing 100% of our country and our economy and 90% of our people, I believe, would be far greater.
Yeah, it is a high cost, and that's a discussion you don't see taking place in our national discussion space. We need discussions about this. We don't need our leaders, so-called leaders, making these decisions on a knee-jerk basis on a day-to-day basis. Dementia Joe is, he's not really the brightest light on the Christmas tree, and I'm not sure a lot of the people in his administration are much brighter, in my humble opinion here. So, they keep stumbling into getting us in deeper and deeper into this quagmire that we're in globally right now, and we're not prepared for it. We're just not up to snuff. I've got a lot of people constantly telling me, Greg, we got the best weapons. We got stuff nobody knows about. We got this, we got that. And I'm having a hard time saying it, having worked in the defense establishment myself. You worked in the defense establishment. Dr. Peter Vincent Pry was one of the world's foremost weapons systems experts. And what he really told us, the gist of what he was telling us was that basically we've allowed ourselves to get so weak that he who strikes first could win. And while we are in this position that our systems aren't up to snuff right now, while we might try to be rebuilding, we've got a very strategic point of weakness right now where we're vulnerable, that we may be tempting China or Russia to in fact strike us and hit us first at this point in time. And like you said, negotiation may be the only thing we got, but they may not even respect that at this point, especially given the bumbling that's been going on by our State Department. Department of State, I think, is some of the biggest bummers I've ever seen anywhere. It's like, how many things can you get wrong? How many mistakes can you make? I am just aghast at the kind of things they've done, and it almost seems it's either negligence, malfeasance, or they're just, or maybe they want war. I don't know what's cooking here, David, but it's shocking to me. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, the Biden regime has a record of really doing the bidding of communist China. We know that communist China has paid the Biden family at least $31 million that we know of, either to Hunter Biden or or to his brother or his dad. Biden has a $5 million payment, in his tax returns that he can't explain. So 5 million, I guess, coincides with the money he got personally from Ukraine as part of that deal where he fired the prosecutor. He got Ukraine to fire the prosecutor that was investigating his son, and by extension himself, for corruption. So he's highly compromised. I believe that Zelensky in Ukraine is likely blackmailing Biden to continue giving him massive aid, whether Congress authorizes it or not. And then if he doesn't, then he might just release all the audio recordings where Biden tries to blackmail the Burisma CEO to cough up another 5 to 10 million, or he's not going to pressure Ukraine to fire the prosecutor general, Viktor Shokin. So, yeah, it's a very scary situation. I would say that one of the few downs or the upsides, I guess, is that if my contention is true that Biden is, and Trump's contention rather, that Biden is in fact a Manchurian candidate, then we would expect that all of his pledges to defend Taiwan militarily are empty. And we can only hope that China believes that as well, because if China thinks that he's serious, there's a very possible chance that China may choose to preempt any U.S. military intervention in the Taiwan conflict that they're planning to happen as early as next year with a blockade or invasion by engaging in a massive cyber attack on the U.S. that could effectively destroy the U.S. And that would be accompanied by a massive counterspace attack that would take out all of our satellites as well.
Cyber attack, anti-satellite attack, maybe an EMP, or even a first strike if they really thought we were going to do something. But I could see the United States being brought down due to this corruption at the top. That's what a lot of people are concerned about. Also, a lot of people look at Iran and think about Iraq and how fast we went through Iraq. Iran is not Iraq. Iran is way beyond where Iraq was when we had Desert Storm. What a lot of people don't also realize is that, what we've talked about in our community for years was the potential for sleeper cells in this country that would take out our power grid with ballistic attack directly on the substations, because the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard said so after the report from FERC came out back in, I guess, March of 2014, saying, well, if you took out as few as 9 substations, the entire power grid could fail. And he was showing that report. And he said, I've already got 20 sleeper cells in the United States to take out these substations. And we already got at least 20, the top ones targeted. And who knows what they would do after that. So going to war right now against any of these guys is going to be very problematic. Look also how China has hacked into our defense software systems, our defense systems, our very core technology that we use to control our military and do all the brilliant things it can do is at some level of risk due to this. So we're in a bad situation. I think diplomacy might be our only hope, but I think we need to be like a duck while we're being diplomatic on top and looking smooth. We need to be paddling like almighty heck underneath, trying to catch up and build the strength up to discourage anybody from hitting us. And this is what Dr. Pryde called 4 years ago, and we've echoed that ever since. I'm not, this Department of State don't seem to give a rat. They don't seem to have a clue about this. And our military leadership that's been in power the last few years has not seemed to be very in tune with this. How do we get there from here?
It's honestly, I think the only way we do it is, there's 2 ways really. There's one way is a shock to the system. If Russia, for example, were to conduct a nuclear demonstration attack, which killed very few Ukrainians, but perhaps, was exploded, as you and I discussed, 9 kilometers above Kyiv, where they took out, most of Ukraine's power, perhaps their entire power grid with, one nuclear weapon exploded in the air, or a substantial amount of it. Something like that, I think, could kind of, force Biden to realize that, okay, nuclear war it's real. It's a real world possibility. It's not just something that, we did, we fought and won a nuclear war against Japan 80 years ago. It's a reality for today. And if Russia were to do that, I can guarantee you that China would be willing to do it as well. In fact, I would argue that China is already willing to do it. I think China is more likely to use theater nuclear weapons in East Asia against Taiwan or U.S. allies and military bases in the region than Russia is. If for any other,
China has an advantage there because all that wind goes offshore for them. Would head out to the Pacific. They don't have to deal with the byproducts of it. unlike Israel with they nuke Gaza or Russia if they nuke Ukraine. A lot of it will be blowing back on them. So China does have an advantage in a strategic, in a tactical nuclear war.
Yeah, especially because the U.S. has, we don't have any nuclear weapons in the Far East or Western Pacific. We have, we took those off our ships, I think, in '91 under President George H.W. Bush, and we never put them back. We have zero nuclear weapons on our aircraft carriers, amphibious assault ships, cruisers, destroyers, and nuclear attack submarines, nuclear-powered attack submarines, as well as the SSGNs that are Ohio-class boats that we disarmed of their nuclear weapons. So at any given time, we have only two nuclear-armed warships in the Pacific. Now we do have, Trump did build 8 to 32 tactical nuclear warheads that are deployable on our Trident IIs. So presumably we'd have maybe 10 to 12 at any given time at max in the Pacific region available. But if we were to launch one of those, I can guarantee you that China would take that as a nuclear first strike. Because I mean it's such a ludicrous decision that we have tactical nukes on our strategic missiles because that would prompt likely, I think, a full nuclear exchange, with just one or two Trident IIs armed with 5 kiloton warheads.
Yeah,
So
let me throw a point out. You said no nukes. What you meant was tactical nukes when you were talking about what's on the ships. We do have our missile submarines that have strategic nukes, and we have sent one on occasion to South Korea. And a lot of people are aware of that. It's not permanently stationed there, as far as I know, but because we've rotated in a submarine that didn't have a nuclear-powered submarine, because all our ships are nuclear-powered, but it didn't have nuke weapons on it. So a lot of people don't know how to distinguish those 2 points. But so periodically we are rotating in a nuclear-armed nuclear submarine to North Korea. I don't know if South Korea, excuse me. I don't know if we got one there now, But you're right, and the Russian ships are carrying these Zircon missiles on their ships. We've had one off the East Coast recently, and yes, they could reach Washington, D.C. in 5 minutes. Joe wouldn't have time to put his underwear on if it happened tonight, between the time they launch it and he, and of course, somebody have to notify him. We'd have to know what was coming. By the time we figured out it was coming, it would be coming through somebody's window probably. But even if somebody told Joe as soon as they launched it, I don't think he'd get his underwear on fast enough, let alone make some nuclear command decisions.
yeah, I doubt. I mean, I think 5 minutes is about the amount of time that Biden would need to get down to the underground presidential emergency operations bunker. So, let alone, open up the football and look at nuclear attack options.
Well, he'd have to have
So,
a special service agent go in and get him out of bed and run him down the stairs.
yeah. Well, yeah, even in the most ideal circumstances, I'm concerned that even half an hour would be sufficient for Biden to make a decision of this magnitude. Um, you know, I can almost guarantee that he wouldn't do it unless we had national technical means, both ground and space, that could confirm a nuclear impact on U.S. soil. I just think he's the most anti-nuke president we've ever had, and he's really averse to nuclear war. So, if Russia or China were to use tactical nuclear weapons, I think the chances of him responding with a nuclear response are pretty much zero. So in terms of today, I think the nuclear umbrella of our allies is almost non-existent. Because the nuclear umbrella, as you well know, there's only one person in the country that has the authorization to launch our nukes, and Biden could easily make the decision to not retaliate at all. Any president has that ability, and that's assuming he even survives the initial first strike. Assuming he doesn't launch earlier, he simply doesn't have the time to launch earlier.
Yeah, he might
And then,
his bank account before he can make a decision, right?
yeah, yeah. So he is really underwater in terms of he's completely outclassed. I mean, he's playing checkers against Putin and Xi. They're playing 4D chess, and he doesn't know what he's doing. And granted, you and I probably realize that he's probably not the one in charge. He's more the figurehead because he doesn't have the brains to do any of these things. He just reads off a teleprompter, and sometimes he can't even do that. So I think there's a cabal of senior cabinet leaders that are really controlling policy in the Biden White House. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor, and of course Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense. They're probably kind of the troika that are leading the way in deciding what wars we're going to fight, what wars we're not going to fight, who we're going to aid, where we're going to get involved, and with essentially no congressional supervision. So it's a very dangerous situation. We need to get prepared and prepare our family both spiritually and physically for the troubles ahead, because we're in a world of hurt right now, and it's going to take new leadership. I'd argue new Republican presidential leadership to get us out of this mess.
I hope we can get there. I don't know. White House kind of reminds me, the Biden White House kind of reminds me of Weekend at Bernie's. He just likes, he's been propped up and carried around, which makes me wonder if one of those guys could actually get the nuclear football and activate it, since he's essentially a prop. He's the puppet, he's the prop for other people in the administration. So who could in reality make these decisions, and under what circumstances would they do it? I think there's just too many questions to be answered. But no matter what, we're in a pickle right now, and people just need to be prepared and be aware, because we've got a lot of potential here in the next few days, weeks, months to make major mistakes, to maybe signal the wrong thing. And we may find ourselves under attack domestically by terrorist groups, by sleeper cells. We may find ourselves under strategic attack. We may find ourselves losing allies due to things going on overseas. Israel's in peril. The Gazans are in peril. The whole world is in peril right now, and including America. And a lot of people think we're immune to things right here at home. They've got this smug assurance, oh, well, nobody's going to bother us here. I don't care. I don't follow that. I don't agree with that, because I think we're in more peril than we've ever been since that War of 1812, and worse than them, because the British just had black powder smoke poles. They didn't have nukes, or we didn't have a power grid that could be taken down that everybody was relying on. Well, I don't think we've ever had a period in our history where we faced danger like this.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. The War of 1812, we got invaded and we got our capital burned. Our president had to flee for safety to avoid capture or lynching at the hands of British forces. The dangers we have today are existential, and it's not just one threat. It's not just the nuclear threat today. We face the nuclear missile threat. We face the super EMP threat. We face massive cyber attack threat. Any one of those three things, and a fourth one, biological attack, could destroy the U.S. The U.S. would be wiped out, and the only question would be what percentage of Americans would be, genocided or starved or whatever the case might be, and how soon our enemies would invade us. A lot of people don't realize that, if we get our government goes down, our grid goes down, our military gets disabled and melts away, China's won't be able to resist the temptation to occupy our west coast, and we don't, it's an open question how far they get, but I can guarantee you, if and when that happens, they'd be on our west coast within a year with massive PLA forces. So this kind of nightmare scenario, we've never faced anything like that. Germany was destroyed and dismembered and split into 7-8 pieces, with millions of their citizens starved to death post-war after their surrender. The apocalypse that the Allies visited on Germany is likely to look like Disney. I mean, I think it's a good comparison, but I think the casualties will be higher on the U.S. side, and I don't think most of the U.S. probably will never be occupied, but a decent part of it could be. But essentially, best case, the U.S. becomes a third world failed state, following a cyber attack, and we never recover. So that's the future that we have if we don't give diplomacy a chance, under Biden, I think.
With far less people than we have today. far less.
That's right.
We're talking, some people just can't grasp the tragedy. Go stand in a room with 20 people and imagine only 2 are left standing when it all shakes out. That's, that's the kind of numbers we got the EMP Congressional Task Force. But there's some assumptions they made that things would be better than I think they will be because of, I think they made some misassumptions about food production and things like that. So I think it'll be worse than that. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think the comparison is think of us all Americans as Jews in the Nazi concentration camps. What was the survival rate? I mean, was it 10%? Was it 25 or 30? Those are the kind of survival rates I think we'd be facing under a super EMP scenario.
yeah, that's pretty bleak. I've known a couple of people that survived out of those. I met a couple of the survivors. And you was talking about how Germany started. My dad was in World War II. He was in Germany. He talked about after the war was over, he was giving his rations to the kids. He said a lot of the soldiers felt sorry for the kids, and they would give the kids food to eat, and they would be like super thankful. And later in my life, when I was working on the International Space Station, back then we called it Space Station Freedom, I worked under a German guy who'd been in the German Air Force, and he used to carry a tactical nuke on his plane. And he told me, so when I was a kid, the American soldiers fed me. I'm going, yeah, I've heard that story from the other side, from my dad. So who's going to take care of our kids when that happens? They won't give a rat's say. I mean, a lot of these people just don't have the sense of humanity that had been typical amongst our population. I said had been. I think we're losing it here too. So I don't know. There's too much evil in the world. I tell people often in my channel that the biggest problems in the world today are hatred, and that we need to combat that by shining love, because love defeats hate just like light defeats dark. And I think we've got a long way to go, though. We've got a long way. We've lost our sense of values in this country. We have lost so much that we need to wake up. Well, David, you got a final observation or point or thing you would like to say that people need to remember, something they can do, or what would be your final point you'd like to make to my listeners?
Yeah, I'd like to invite all of your viewers to please go to my website at dpyne.substack.com and subscribe to my Real War newsletter. Again, dpyne.substack.com. I post regular updates. I have a lot more to say. I actually only publish about 10% of what I write. I have a lot of unfinished projects. I'm the king of unfinished projects. But what I do write, what I try to focus on is our real world solutions. We have a lot of national security experts that are really good at articulating the threat, but they can articulate real world solutions. It's pie in the sky. It's make Russia surrender unconditionally, instead of let's have a truce, let's have an armistice that is acceptable to both sides, so they don't invade again. Trying to resolve the long-term differences with Russia so we can better counter China, but do so in a way that's more economic focused, in terms of economic war rather than a military or nuclear war. So I would encourage your viewers to maybe send links to my articles to members of Congress, state legislators, people that are policymakers, and also to go to the EMP Task Force website at emptaskforce.us, where you can volunteer both time and money. We're always in need of more state leadership volunteers to help the cause. This is a cause that could save 90% of Americans. Super EMP hardening, it wouldn't save all those Americans, but it might just deter a super EMP attack from materializing in the first place. That's really the goal, is to reestablish nuclear and EMP deterrence, so that our enemies know that these weapons aren't a magic bullet anymore. They're not a silver bullet that can slay the U.S. Dragon, so to speak. If we reestablish deterrence, we can, nuclear parity, like as we had during the Cold War, we can survive. Our country can survive another half century. We won't have to worry about, look over our shoulder and see if there's a nuclear missile in the air, if the satellites still work. Checking our phones every time there's an outage. I have to wonder if there's no service. Is this a super EMP or cyber attack, or what's going on? I don't know if you've ever had that, but if the car works, I'm reassured.
Blue sky outside,
you know,
go out. I go, what was that?
Yeah. Yeah, so we don't need to live in fear anymore. You know, we're a huge country. Our enemies are willing to coexist with us peacefully. China wants to take over the world economically, not militarily. But if we defend Taiwan militarily, I am quite certain they'll try to destroy us. And my fear is they might be successful. So we need men and women in leadership in the U.S. That are of courageous vision, such as Donald Trump, Vivek Ramaswamy, and Ron DeSantis. Any one of those three presidents, I think, could steer us out of the mess that Biden's got us into. It's amazing that the world is suddenly on fire when we were at relative peace and stability under Donald Trump. So, every vote counts. Every vote makes a difference.
Biden
Uh,
really
uh,
improving international relations. Boy, he's done a swell job, has he not?
yeah, he called it the return of the adults to the room. And you really have to laugh at that. He really couldn't have done a worse job if he were a sleeper agent, which he very well might be. So
Yeah,
let's hope and pray for the best. And if we try to repent as a nation and return to our beloved Savior Jesus Christ, who's the God of this land, and prepare our families to do likewise, then I think we have a fighting chance to save our great country.
I agree. We've got a chance, but we got a lot to do, and I just hope somebody don't blow it before we get a chance. I like to add one little thing in part. And you talked about making a peace deal with Russia. Well, this is something I got some new viewers who haven't watched me talk this in previous videos, but I've said way back, way back before all this stuff got started, that the best thing we could do is make a peace deal with Russia and against China, because Russia's long-term enemy, their biggest threat in the long term isn't us, it's China, and they know that. But we've made ourselves the immediate enemy, so they've kind of threw themselves in the arms of China almost as a junior partner, and I'm sure they don't like that. So we put them into the dragon's mouth, as it were. We put the bear in the dragon's mouth. It could have went down differently, and who knows? We might be able to salvage that somewhat, but there's a lot of hurts gone down the river since then with the wars and everything going on. It may be hard to put this Humpty Dumpty back together again, but we need to find a way toward peace in some fashion.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Peace is the focus. I mean, peace through strength is what Reagan championed. He didn't get us in any big wars. He invaded Grenada. That wasn't even really a war, was it? I mean, it was like 600 enemy militiamen or whatever.
Yeah, if I'd have
On
stayed with the unit
us.
I'd been in Fort Bragg instead of going to Alaska, I'd have been there. Yeah,
Yeah.
I went to Alaska, and then the unit I was with went to Grenada, but I almost went to Iran before that. So,
That would have been a more challenging mission. But yeah, I mean, we need to follow Reagan's example. Reagan didn't choose to liberate East Germany from the Soviets. He tried to make it come down peacefully, and he succeeded. So he did so by cooperative negotiated diplomatic agreements with the Soviet Union that gave Gorbachev the confidence that he believed the U.S. would not exploit the collapse of the Soviet Union. So
what he did
I don't.
what he did before that, though, is he quit appeasing the other side. He stood up. He stood up for strength. He stood up for the country, and there was no appeasement coming at him. Said, "Look, you want to negotiate? You want this? It's on our terms." And it was a very different situation, more so than his predecessor, Jimmy Carter, and a lot of these other predecessors that were all so afraid of offending the bear. He wasn't afraid of offending them, but he did it smartly. And in the end, he and Gorby got along great. But these authoritarian powers, they appreciate strength. They respect people that come to them from a position of strength, because that's the language they know. This other stuff, they don't appreciate that. They don't even respect it. They don't respect you when you come from a position of weakness. You can't do that with them.
Yeah, the problem is strength is not. It's not an attitude. It's not talking tough. Strength is hard military power.
Yeah.
And in terms of hard military power, we can't rebuild our military and our nuclear forces and strategic defenses in a couple of years. It likely will take 4 or 5. So, and that's assuming that we go full bore with the Manhattan style project that Dr. Pry advocated. So, while we're still a little bit weaker or substantially weaker than Russia and China, we need to pursue a peaceful diplomatic route of the kind that Reagan did when he was backed up by rough nuclear parity. against the Soviet Union. We don't have that advantage right now. We don't have parity. So that's why it's even more important to pursue to meet our enemies halfway. And that doesn't mean we're going to appease our enemies. It means we're going to recognize that they have vital security interests and that we do as well. And we'll grant their in some kind of sphere of influence arrangement. We'll recognize their vital national security interests in exchange for them recognizing ours. So we're not going to give any more than we take from them. That's the kind of diplomacy we need. That's the kind that Reagan championed, in which both sides gave up something to achieve a mutually agreeable and desirable end.
Yeah, well, we don't have no statesmen today. Anyway, hopefully we can come out of that. Hopefully we'll get a new administration in and get ourselves prepared. Peace through strength. I was in Jimmy Carter's army, and it was a ragbag organization, and then Reagan took over, and it changed overnight to organization has strength and self-respect. It was literally a day-night difference between the two sides of being in the military. But anyway, I really appreciate you. I appreciate your perspective. I appreciate you coming on my channel and sharing your thoughts. And let's pray. I tell my folks, prep and pray. We got to get ready for the worst and pray for the best. So, David, once again, thank you for being a guest on my channel. Thank you for being here. For all you that listen, I'll put the links below. David, email me the links. I want to chat with you for 1 second more. So for everybody here, thank you for watching. And with that,
Thanks, Greg.
I will have to say, hang on, I got to expand this thing. We're going to turn it off.